And as John was saying, they plucked me out of college. I've been here for about 6 years now with Cowpens Battlefield. What we're going to be doing is not the entire battlefield loop, just due to time constraints today. But we are going to do a little kind of two shift tour. We're going to head down the trail, talking a little bit about what the field looked like then, where some of the pieces were, and then we're going to turn around, come right back up, make a little semi-loop, and look at it from the British perspective, kind of really seeing how the battle happened, how everything opened up the morning of January 17th, 1781. A little bit of background info. This is right in the middle of the Southern Campaign. A lot of our visitors here see the date of 1781 and say, well, the revolution was 75 to 83, so this must be right near the end, things are wrapping up. That could not be further from the truth. This action happens only 9 months after the largest British victory of the entire war. Charlestown, South Carolina falls on May 12th, 1780. The entire Southern Continental Army captured in the city when it falls, near 6,000 men. Now, the militia are paroled, allowed to go back up here to their settlements throughout the state, but the Continentals are held down there in barracks for a while and eventually prison ships, like you would have up in New York Harbor, same down here in Charleston. Just add the summer heat, humidity, disease, all that good stuff. So after Charleston falls, you have a replacement army sent south, Horatio Gates, coming down through North Carolina, runs into the British, the Battle of Camden, another huge British victory, another 1,000 Americans captured, sent down there to the prison ships. You really need to keep this local spirit alive. You have this huge propaganda victory for the British. They're able to say, look, your army can't stand up against any of ours. This is why you need to come back into the fold, accept citizenship, and help us go back against the rest of the rebels. The purpose that Daniel Morgan has, his mission given to him by General Nathaniel Greene, is to come out here and spirit up the people. So encourage these local patriots. Show them that there is still hope for the patriot cause. Keep everything going. And with Morgan is a small corps of about 290 Continentals, Maryland and Delaware, about 300 more Virginia militia, some cavalry. And with this little corps, he's sent out here to the Western District, the backcountry, with this whole mission of gathering supplies, encouraging the locals, just being this major harassing thorn in the side of the British. So we're going to head down here, talk a little bit more about where some of Morgan's troops were and why he makes it up here to this area. And if you all have any questions along the way, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them for you. How we doing, Chris? Good. Oh, cold and wet. Of course. Yeah. Warmer up on the mountain.
To put smoke on it.
Yeah.
I once, a director told me, he said, if it doesn't have smoke in it, people don't believe it's over. So obviously you guys arranged for the
So
smoke.
you couldn't wear the beard when you were in actor, huh?
Yeah.
No, actually, my wife and I just had our first child a few months ago, so I'm taking this little hiatus to grow out the winter pelt. You're going to have to lose that in a couple months here.
Be a Civil War reenactor.
There you go. All right, we'll rally right about here. It appears somebody already has. All righty. Now we decided to hold up here because this is one of the first noticeable features here onto the battlefield. You notice the hillside that we walked down into this low area. There's another hillside leading us up on the rest of the trail. In this low area, they described it as a ravine back in 1781. This is where you have the Patriot Cavalry. So William Washington, a colonel of the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons, about 170 Patriot troopers right here in the woods behind me, formed up, mounted up, just waiting for the word. Now the reason they are here, originally, they're going to be up on the middle of the battlefield on a ridge where they can be seen. A nice little encouragement to the local militia. But once the battle begins, the British have 2 cannon. They start to fire solid shot, lands a little too close for comfort. Washington moves his cavalry down here to the side. Now, because of this depression and the woods that he was in, these troopers cannot be seen for the majority of the battle. They cannot be seen from here. They can't see what's happening. They are hidden. It's not until they're going to attack later on that is Tarleton aware of where these people are. Now, Tarleton is coming up the road. He's been pursuing Morgan for 5-6 days. He's got not only local loyalist spies, but his own cavalry scouting out for him. They are bringing him back all kinds of intelligence. Sometimes it's way off in left field. Sometimes it's fairly accurate. But he knows that Morgan has these cavalry. He just does not know where they are on the field. Now, the trees around us, here on the battlefield, you will not find any witness trees, nothing going back 237 years and 1 month. After the battle was fought, this was in the early 1800s, started to get sold off. The first few are Revolutionary War veterans, part of just land grants given out to them. You then see this cut up even more. And again, like we mentioned earlier, the 35 houses, the highways, the cotton fields, peach orchards just took over. So that was kind of a little blessing in disguise, because when the Park Service steps in 1970, it had been almost entirely cleared and we had a blank slate. We're able to decide what to allow to come back, what to keep cleared. So these trees here represent the thick woods that bordered the entire battlefield. One participant who's down here with the cavalry, Thomas Young, he's fighting here on his 17th birthday. He writes that the lowest branches of the trees were high above their heads of the mounted troopers. So large, old growth woods, not a lot of brush. It's described as an open wood, part pasture out there. We'll see that in a second, but little to no growth in front. So it's easy to move, but hard to see. So we're going to keep going now, get to the crest of the ridge, and actually look into the cow pen. Yes. So we got to make paint. Yeah. This was a well-known
Yeah. Yeah.
See?
I'm sorry?
The possible. Becoming obsolete.
We don't want to take you on vacation. You can't come.
I'll make a mention of that, so that's a good point. All right, so those of you who have the Civil War Trust maps wanted to follow along with us, if you see the Continental line where it says Tate, the blue line, the Continental line, their right flank, that's where we are now. We're right here at the edge of the Cowpen. We've exited the thick woods that surrounded the entire field, and now you can see what we maintain as the recreated battlefield. The open wood, part pasture, with little to no growth in front. Now, right here is where you're going to have the Continental line, including the Maryland, the Delaware Continentals, and those Virginia militia, right where we're standing, straight across to the next side of the woods. Now, they're not going to be in a solid, straight formation, but they're going to be formed an echelon. You're going to have some gaps in the line. They've been pulled back a little bit. Morgan has done this to create doorways. The entire plan he's about to pull off here is called a defense in depth. So he's going to have these three staggered lines all the way down the field. And the plan is for the militia, the sharpshooters, further down, they're going to engage the British, make contact, cause casualties, but retreat before they get into hand-to-hand combat. They're going to eventually move through the Continental line and reform here in the rear, come back around for another shot later on. That's why, if you're familiar with the story of the battle, Morgan goes around to the militia the night before this action. He tells them 3 shots and you're free. That's all he wants from them. 3 shots and they can go home. But when he forms them on the field, he says 2 shots from here, then you can fall back. So we're going to see that spot in just a little bit. Now, as far as these Continentals go, these troops are some of the best of the best. These are veterans of almost every major battle you can think of in the Northern Campaign. You have Continentals here. They've seen action at Morristown, Princeton, Brandywine, Germantown, Saratoga, Valley Forge. Some of these guys were at Camden. They know how to fight British regulars. They have French muskets mostly, the Charleville muskets, about a 69 caliber with a 14-inch socket bayonet. They can face the British in hand-to-hand combat and hold their own for the most part. That makes these guys the backbone of Morgan's army and the single biggest threat to Tarleton and the British on this entire field. The entire time that Tarleton is chasing Morgan through this Carolina backcountry, his goal, his mission is to destroy these Continentals. He knows that if he accomplishes that, the rest of the Patriot support, the locals, they won't stand up. They'll go into hiding, they'll leave the colony, they'll maybe join the British side. He knows that, and Morgan knows that. Morgan writes to his superior, Greene, 2 days before the battle. He says that if he keeps retreating 5.5 more miles up this wagon road into North Carolina across the Broad River, he says the South Carolinians will be so disheartened, so discouraged, that they will join the British cause to save their own necks, is how he words it. He needs to have a battle here in South Carolina at a place where these locals can come and meet him. So where better than the local cow pasture? Now, some earlier books have called this Hannah's Cowpens. That's been disproven. That was a different one. This was Saunders' Cowpen. So with this thick wooded perimeter around here, in this climate, wherever you have well-drained soil and water sources, you're going to have river cane. It's an American cousin of bamboo, grows the same way, 15, 20 feet tall, almost an impenetrable thicket. And all surrounding us in these woods, you have creeks, swamps, springs, making those prime conditions. So surrounded by cane breaks, surrounded by water features, these thick woods, cattle won't wander off too far. It's a very open range kind of mindset. So as Morgan is coming up this road, he enlists a local captain, Dennis Trammell, who lives about 2.5 miles away. Dennis leads Morgan into this field, shows him around, and after seeing this ground, Morgan turns to Captain Trammell and says, this field will hold victory or Morgan's bones. This is where he's going to make his stand. Other pension accounts, they talk about once it is known that Morgan is going to stop retreating and fight, the men do a 180 in their personality. They've been grumbling, cursing the general. Now they're ready to do this. They're walking faster, marching faster. They're cheering for him. They're ready to do this. They get into here the evening of the 16th. They make camp somewhere in the area behind me. The Continentals are going to form here. The rest further down the road. So we're going to keep heading down here into the battlefield and see the wagon road itself. Yes, sir.
The line is going this way.
This way.
Going this way.
They're coming from that way.
Where's north? Where's north?
Okay, where
Yes.
are we?
North to that way.
North that
We
way.
are-
And is this the road?
way.
Remnants of the road over here. That's one of the roads. Okay. That one. Yeah, that right there, yeah. Yes. All along the road. Hold on. The majority of them were from the 1950s. Actually, we had a local volunteer that great guy, World War II vet. Spent 2 years before the Forest Service came through. Tornadoes came through. Destroyed his house, turned the back from all of us. They hear the government thing was my fault. Yeah, really. You never hear the shampoo down the road. The applicable Civil War history here. We'll talk about this. Can't feel my fingers. Now, being the Civil War Trust, we got to talk about the Civil War history here. This monument, this is the very first marker built here on the site in 1856, the Washington Light Infantry Monument. So these guys are a Charleston, South Carolina-based militia unit. They still exist today as a fraternal society, and they come out here in 1856 to build a monument to where you had Northerners and Southerners together against a common enemy. The commander of the regiment, he's been seeing a lot of this secession ideas, a lot of anger, and not only in the political climate, but in his own unit. So he figures we need to do something that's more uniting than dividing. So they take a train from Charleston, South Carolina to Lawrence, and then march from Lawrence, South Carolina here, and bringing with them all the supplies they needed to build this, the iron, the concrete. Now they build it, they have a ceremony, and then they go back to Charleston. There's a few farms out here and not much else. So it starts to get heavily vandalized very early on. Souvenir hunters taking pieces off of it, carving their initials, such on and so forth. It gets so bad that a group of locals nearby, they buy the property, build the wall, build the fence. That doesn't help. It just gives a bigger target. So a piece at a time, this entire fence was stolen. The Park Service had to replace the entire thing in the 70s. Same with the wall, had to build that back up. Marble facings on the concrete base, those were gone. One neat note, the concrete is made with sand from Sullivan's Island down there in Charleston, Fort Moultrie. So that is a little kind of shout out to all of South Carolina. But the biggest loss was the gilded eagle, a golden bird on top of the post. That was not stolen. That was taken down and put somewhere safe, so safe we still can't find it. Now, another tie-in with Civil War history is that I've heard some mentions, heard some rumors, I'm still trying to verify this, but there's a possibility that in the spring of '65, as Davis is retreating from Richmond, federal cavalry are pushing in from East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, trying to intercept. Possibly some of Stoneman's cavalry come through the field, stop to read the monument, and then keep going down towards Spartanburg. So still trying to verify that, but that little pass-through, that's all we have as far as Civil War. But back to the Revolution, if you'll actually turn around here, you'll see the other bus coming by us. They are walking along the trace of the original wagon road. So this was the Green River Road that both armies followed coming into this location, and this is what was then used as a highway. It was graded, it was leveled, it was paved in the early 20th century. It's lost a good bit of the original terrain. If you look off to the edges here, 25, 30 yards, that's a better example of what this terrain would have looked like. So there was a very slight ridge that we're standing on here that runs across into the next woods. We're gonna see if we can pass our groups. We're gonna cut down this little footpath that you see, get onto the wagon road, and we're gonna head down towards the next line of Morgan's army with the militia.
You know, the typical Southern response to something that existed before the Civil War and not after. We knew it was here in '60. I don't know what happened.
Civil Road.
I'll make use of my speaking block. Came built in with the battlefield. It was great. It didn't have to pay extra.
Is that a witness stump?
Sadly not. Now, did y'all get to see that at Kings Mountain though?
No.
At Kings Mountain, right along the trail, there's just the basic ring, the remnants of a stump that may have been a sapling at the back. Can't prove it, the tree's long gone, but just there's so much turpentine left in the bark that the bark is still there. So just guessing off the size, it's possibly there at the back. All right, so now with the cut through that we did, we've advanced about 150 yards ahead of the Continental Line. So it's a little easier to see now if you look back towards where we came from, the slight ridge that there is between us and the next group, then it dips down again. That is a key feature of this field. It is just these gradual, slight rolling hills the entire way down. And from a distance, these stack up. It's very difficult to see what is going on, who's there, what's happening. And then when you add in the open woods that were scattered through here, and then these lines of a couple thousand men, then it gets really tricky. You can't tell what's happening. So back there, the Continental Line, about 600 strong, including the Virginia militia. This is the backbone of Morgan's army, the trained veteran soldiers. Now, here, not quite the same guys. This is where you're going to have the local militia under Colonel Andrew Pickens. So these are the locals, and they kind of get a bad rap in history. If you look at a lot of school history books or Schoolhouse Rock, you got these local militia, these farmers, they grab their squirrel guns, hide behind a tree, fire a bullet, win the war. Not quite. These guys are veterans of 6 years of some of the bloodiest, most terrible civil war that this country has ever seen. These guys, you're looking at midnight raids, 3 a.m. hangings, just groups of neighbors, Hatfield McCoy-style feuds coming back up to the surface. It is nasty stuff. These guys have been involved in huge campaigns against the Cherokee Indians to the west, the Creek Indians to the southwest. These guys are tough. They're fighters, but they're not trained soldiers. That's the big difference here. Most of these militia, they are bringing their own personal weapons to service. So you're looking at hunting rifles, bird guns, maybe some old captured military weapons. When it comes down to hand-to-hand combat, they're pulling out their Indian fighting tools, scalping knives, tomahawks, handheld weapons. Very, again, Patriot style, Mel Gibson with his stuff. The big issue here is that when you come in an open field against British regulars, your range with a handheld weapon is your arm's length. And when your opponent has a 5-foot-long British shortland pattern musket with a 16-inch blade on the end of that, he can reach you long before you can reach him. They have seen this time and again here in the South. Tarleton's troops especially. They know that if you see shiny bayonets coming towards you down that field, you will not be able to fight against that. You need to fire as quick as you can and get out of here. For example, Battle of Camden, August of 1780. About 2/3 of the American army, the militia, when they see bayonets coming, there's accounts of men throwing down their loaded guns and running away. The entire American army breaks when they're hit with a bayonet charge. And then just 2 months before this fight, Battle of Blackstock's plantation, Tarleton is there with 80 infantry. Now, as part of this battle, his 80 infantry are attacked by 400 of Thomas Sumter's militia. When those 80 infantry fix bayonets and move forward, the 400 militia turn and run. The bayonet is a superior weapon in open, organized militia here. This is why they have the orders: fire 2 shots and then fall back. Morgan will not make these men stand here and meet that charge. He knows they're scared of it. He knows they won't stand here. Might as well make it part of the plan. Now, as far as numbers for these guys, we don't really know yet. We're seeing that for a surprise a little bit later. These are the ones that Morgan writes about, not knowing within a matter of hundreds how many he can count on here. He says it is beyond the art of man to keep the militia from straggling behind. So they're nearby, they're in the area, but they're not in camp. So he doesn't know how many. Once he knows there will be a battle here, he sends out the call, sends out the messengers, and they're joining up here all throughout the night of the 16th. Even there's one unit, they arrive here as the battle is ending, take part in the pursuit. So they're just pouring into here all night long. We don't know how many are actually going to be here until the battle begins. We're going to go down a little bit further into the front line of Morgan's troops and get a little better view. Hopefully see the cane break before we have to head back.
When you said two volleys, sorry.
Now, when I'm out here with 3rd and 4th grade field trips, I like to break out the period correct warming technique. There's actual pension accounts that talk about the militia being ordered to stamp their hands together to keep warm, to make the kids clap a few times, get those fingers feeling again. This is as far as we're going to go down the field today, just due to time constraints. And this sign, in my opinion, is in the wrong place. This is in the marker where you would have had one of the militia regiments. If you look back, you have the bench back there, the ditch going across the field to the right. That's a good marker for where the militia were all across the field, 4 regiments. One of those regiments advances up here to this spot, just behind the crest of the ridge here, so they can help support the sharpshooters. The main body of sharpshooters are across the ridge, scattered across the forward slope of the ridge here, the skirmishers. So these are going to be about 100 North Carolinians, some Kings Mountain veterans there. They're going to be on the right. The left is going to be 75 Georgians from Elijah Clark's militia, joined by some South Carolinians, around 200 total. Not sure about an exact number here, but they're spread across the entire front side of that ridge. Now, right here behind me, to your left, this is going to be the best preserved height of Hayes Ridge. This used to run all the way across the field here. It was impossible to see past this, but as you can see now, thanks to the highway department, we have a nice clear field of view going down the field. Now, the battle begins on January 17, 1781 at sunrise. Tarleton's troops have been in pursuit of Morgan and this group for the past 5 or 6 days. In fact, the day before this battle, they ran out of food. That is how fast they're moving. They're not trying to worry about keeping the food up with them. They have been going so fast and so hard. They're expending way more calories than they're taking in. They are just already tired, battle fatigued before the battle begins. Tarleton has these guys about 12 miles away when the sun goes down on the 16th. By sunrise, they're 5 miles away. So they're marching all through that night, crossing flooded rivers, flooded creeks. The weather that you're seeing here, a nice typical South Carolina winter. These rains, a few melting snows are flooding all the roads, flooding the streams. The dirt roads are turned to mud. And this is the same path that Morgan is taking. So they're following behind. So after Morgan's army comes down that mud road, churning it up, here comes Tarleton's guys trying to catch up. So this is just amazingly difficult. Now they're coming down here. They've been on the march since 2:30 this morning. They get here just as the sun is rising, and they form part of their ranks. Tarleton knows that he's finally caught Morgan somewhere in this field. He writes in his memoirs after the war that when he hears about the layout of the field, about how it's surrounded by woods and swamps, I like to use the analogy of a cage match. He knows that Morgan is trapped within these swamps. He writes that something to the effect of the American continent rarely creates fields so proper for his troops. Like, he is ready to send his guys in here. He has 1,200 of the Crown's best soldiers. One contemporary author refers to them as the flower of Cornwallis's army. You have light infantry, light cavalry, artillery, the 71st Highlanders, 7th Fusiliers. These guys know what they're doing. They've been in campaigns all over the American colonies. Now, once they hit this field, again, sun is just coming up, Tarleton halts them for 30 minutes and take off all unnecessary equipment, knapsacks, canteens, blankets, haversacks, leave it piled up by the edge of the road. They're going in, ready for business, musket, bayonet, ammunition only. Now, if you look way down the field, I mean way down, as far as you can see, that white sign to the left of the road, that is the deployment point. They reach that spot. The right wing moves out across that open field. The left wing starts to move out into the woods, trying to form up, and the battle begins. Now, once they've about half formed their line, the British have 2 3-pounder cannon. They start to fire, and those cannonball just whoosh clean over us here, landing in the rear. They are elevating those tubes to clear this ridge, in effect, clearing the main militia line. This is the shot that causes Washington to move his cavalry down into that gully where we started. Now, the British, they're described as moving forward with a cheer. So they are so excited and encouraged. The officers order the men to raise a shout, giving 3 huzzas as they move forward. The sharpshooters start to pick off officers. Morgan has ordered these riflemen on that forward ridge there to target the epaulet men. He knows that that will cause confusion in the British ranks. It will throw off their attack. They're targeting those brightly dressed officers, and they're running back. These sharpshooters retreat over the top of this hill, and they join the militia line. They fall into the woods and the swamps on the flanks here. Now, when the British see this, training kicks in. They have been taught that once the enemy, especially militia, once they're on the run, you keep that energy going, that momentum, keep it rolling. Don't give these rebels a chance to reform, regroup, and come back on the attack. So the faster these sharpshooters run away, the faster these British infantry pursue. Now, when they top over the ridge, right here behind me, this is their first chance to actually see the main militia line clearly. Tarleton talks about looking down and seeing 1,000 rebel militia in front of him. So they did not know how many militia are here. Here's 1,000 of them in solid ranks. Now, these guys are Indian fighters. They're partisans, but they know how to fight in tactics. So they're here 2 ranks deep, side by side, nearly 1,000 men. Now, when the British see this, it's a little bit of an oh no moment number 1. They're not expecting this, but they're militia, about 200 yards away. This is within within range of a musketry. The militia are not firing. This leads the British to believe that the militia are panicking. They're scared. They're about to break and run. They need a little bit of a push. So the British, with bayonets fixed, they keep charging in, keep cheering. When they get to this spot here, about 35, 45 yards away, that's when the militia open up. The militia are not scared, well, maybe a little bit. They have been ordered to hold their fire until they can clearly see the British faces. A few accounts actually say the whites of their eyes. The British get to this spot, and those rifles of the militia open up on them. 4 blasts of rifle fire. Brandon, Thomas, Hayes, Roebuck, all over this field. These regiments tear into the British ranks. We don't know how many go down here, but it's enough to stagger the British advance. They dress their ranks, fill the gaps, and they close in a little bit more. They give a fire of their own right into the militia, then they charge with bayonets. 18th century combat is all about timing and tactics. If you fire too soon, the enemy can get closer, fire into you before you've reloaded. It's all about that timing. The British have waited until they've received this militia fire because they thought they were about to break and run, but now they've delivered their own and they're closing in. When the militia see these British bayonets closing in, they don't have time to reload. They were ordered 2 shots and then you can fall back. No time for that. These militia rifles take about 35, 45 seconds to reload. Having to measure the powder out of your horn, that tight-fitting rifle ball, they don't have time. They start to fall back. Now, some hand-to-hand combat is experienced. Men in Hayes Regiment over here to the left of the road, they record bayonet wounds among some of their guys. I'm not sure they're on your map, but Hayes Regiment right here to the left, when the British see the militia taking off, again, training kicks in. They're on the run, push in, let's get these guys off the field. Somewhere on this field, down the road, you can kind of see Continentals are down there. Let's catch them before they've formed. The sun is just coming up over the trees. Let's get them off the field, catch Morgan, destroy this force, win the battle. Now, sir, if you wanted to, I think the dirt here on the side is pretty good. We had this gravel put in a couple months ago, and it's a little too thick.
Yeah, it's kind of deep, but it's,
All right, great, good.
they need to get a tracked vehicle, bud.
I did that earlier, but it seems to be fine on the gravel.
All right.
You said Morgan didn't have formal military training. Must have picked it up pretty well to come up with.
So, Morgan, yeah, that's a great question. We'll address that here once we're all gathered up. That's a really good point. So just real briefly, talking about some of Morgan's experience and his training, it's not formal. His first kind of taste of the army life is serving as a wagon driver on Braddock's expedition in '55 against the French up in the forks of the Ohio River, and does not go well for him. He sees kind of what happens when the British Army tries to do woods fighting, and then he gets flogged for assaulting an officer, pretty much. So he has all these frontier backcountry experiences, Indian fighting. He was a ranger in the French and Indian War a little bit, local militia ranger. But then in the Revolution, he's a rifleman captain. He's at the Siege of Boston briefly, the attempt on Quebec. He's serving alongside Nathaniel Greene, Benedict Arnold, Matt Anthony Wayne, and his light infantry acting in tandem. He's at Saratoga. So this is all building up. He has seen how these troops fight. He knows how to use Continentals, light infantry, riflemen, all in tandem and conjunction together. So when he comes here to the South, this little force that he has, this combined task force of these militia, the Continentals, and the cavalry, this is what he's good at. Using these different troops, using their strengths to overcome other weaknesses in this great little force. So he's been out here with these guys since sometime in late October, some accounts make it seem. And this is why he's such a big threat to the British. They know Morgan has the experience, they know the troops that he has, they're aware of who he is and his reputation. So that's why Tarleton is so gung-ho about catching him here. Now, as the British line is coming forward down this road, again, they're trying to keep to the open areas. They can't move through those swampy areas on the flanks. When they first formed up, there was not enough room for the entire force to gather together. The 71st Highlanders were held back about 150 yards as a reserve. There just wasn't space for them on the British left. But now that we've gotten to this point, the field's a little wider, the woods are more open, and now you've suffered a lot of British casualties. The line's a little bit shorter. The Highlanders are ordered to advance up and join the left wing. Now, when you want to picture the British line advancing here, forget the movies. These guys are not side by side slowly marching into rebel fire. These guys are using what they call bushfighting, or the American method of warfare. They're going to spread their line out to about a yard between each man, a yard front to back. They're quickly moving, jogging down the field here. They know how to fight against the Americans. This is 1781. They've been practicing this for 6 years in the field. They know what they're doing. Also, this American army they're fighting against, they don't exactly have to be careful about engaging them, not like the French or the Prussians. These Americans scare very easy. The best way to scare them, fix bayonets, start charging, they'll run. They've seen it all over the place. That's what they're doing here. Now the militia are easily taking off and escaping the British charge. Remember the fatigue of the British soldiers here. Marching since 2:30, 6 days of pursuit, barely any food, they're exhausted. Tarleton can see that. As he watches militia retreat, this is the perfect target for his light cavalry. He sends some of them forward. 50 of his light dragoons from the right flank of his line go moving forward. This is the 17th Light Dragoon Regiment, 50 strong, about 2 ranks deep. These guys are on big horses, big swords, and a nice slow trot as they begin to move forward. They're going to gain speed the closer they get. By the time they reach the militia in a second, they'll be going at a full gallop. We'll see that what happens in a second there. One more account here. One of my favorite accounts of the battle is Lieutenant Roderick Mackenzie. He's a British light infantry officer over on the far right. He says by the time his company got past the second line of militia, they have lost 2/3 of their officers. Wow. The same proportion of men. These rifle shots from the skirmishers, from the militia, they've met their mark. They've been targeting the epaulet men, causing confusion, making that fatigue even worse. So the British line, we're going to keep charging forward here, trying to close with those militia, and the closer we get, the better we see Continentals waiting for us down the field here. Yes. So you have the plane. Corporal, you have one up. Sergeant, triplet, and a captain. Lieutenant, usually not carrying any kind of firearm. It's going to have the same, a similar stash, different material, epaulet, and it goes there. Captain, you have a little rectangle on that. And then from there, you keep going up. Similar to fine quality, fine lighter color. Go from silver decoration to gold, gray. Once you get to that danger of thermal, you got gold rays on the Not these ones, but there were three. Yeah. Now the biggest visual block though, so we're following the British line, they're coming down the road here, they can kind of see the Continentals right here where we kind of first started from, extending from one tree line to the next, all the way across the field. The biggest visual block are those militia. They're running down the field here, they're falling back as Morgan ordered, going through those gaps he left in the line. If you can see the field on the other side of the trees, way back there, through those pines, that's where the militia are heading. They finally regroup and stop running there. That's when they're hit by the British cavalry. Those 50 dragoons, the 17th Light Dragoon Regiment, go thundering around the right flank of the British. They get around the American left, and they hit those militia. Again, full gallop. 1,000 pounds per man and horse, 25, 30 miles an hour, just smashing into those militia ranks. These militia panic. They take off into the woods, trying to find their horses. A few of them are able to reload, begin rifle fire against those cavalry. But where's the American dragoons? Still back in that gully, in those woods. But Washington is on the ridge watching all of this happen. When he sees British cavalry moving forward, he's good. He can assume what their target is, those militia. He orders half of his command, the 80 of the 3rd Continental Light, to draw sabers, but hold. They wait till the British cavalry are so focused on the militia that they're not expecting it. That's when he goes in. They come straight across this field here and smash into the side of the British cavalry. You're looking at so much force. You have horse-on-horse collisions that launch men out of the saddles. They tear through once, wheel around, twice again, chase them down the field, saving the militia. A bit of a grudge right here between the 3rd Light and British Dragoons. So they tear into them, and they keep chasing them off. While that's happening, the British infantry top over the ridge, through these little open trees here. The militia are out of the way. There's the Continental line. They engage with these guys. They're greeted by a volley of 62 caliber French lead musket balls and buckshot. The British give it right back into them with their 69 caliber British musket balls. Just back and forth right here. It's a slugfest. There is so much smoke here. You can't see what's going on. You can't tell what's happening. The first volleys, from all the accounts I've read, the first volleys were together. They're called a rolling volley. So beginning on one side, just boom, 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 all the way down the line. After that, it starts to get a little loose. It starts to just, whenever that company is ready, they're blasting away. Both officers on either side talk about this, saying it was the most murderous fire. Much slaughter was produced on both sides, similar statements of that nature. In all of this, the Highlanders are up around the British left here, coming along the tree line. They are able to outflank and swing around the American right. When the American right, some Virginians, when they see those Highlanders coming around, that's bad news bears. That's not good. The order is given for that right-hand company to refuse the flank, to swing back like a door, turn the line, very kind of 20th Maine, little round top, to turn the line, defend against that new threat. They can't hear, they can't see. While the order is being passed down, the Highlanders close to 40 yards away, give a volley, and start to charge. Now, if you've never heard 200 charging Highlanders with bagpipes, it sends a panic down you. When that volley comes into those Virginians, it wounds 3 officers. The guys who are trying to orchestrate this maneuver. It causes confusion. That right-hand company does not wheel. They just go straight down the field, retreating. The rest of the Continentals, they look, enemy to the front, enemy to the side, and your buddies are leaving. They assume a retreat has been ordered. So as they give that last rolling volley, each company fires, turns, and begins to move back. They think they've been told to withdraw, so they start to move. When the British infantry, when they see this happen, here they are, the backbone of Morgan's army, the best trained American troops on this field in the South, walking away from you. You've done it. You've broken the back of Morgan's army. This is your chance. They start rushing forward. No order to charge is given. They just start rushing forward, coming on like a mob, it was described, trying to catch these guys. So let's follow with them, see if we can get them. Yes. When they could have a uniform, yes. You have a few accounts too of when they can't even have an officer's regimental uniform. They're using the hunting shirts or rifle shirts instead. Different ways to dye the cape, dye the collar, maybe add an epaulet, find a way to signify a rank. because, you know, forget, well, the enemy can see them and pick them out. They're not worried about that. They're worried about, in the chaos of combat, your men need to find you. So they have some kind of identifying mark.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right, so the Continentals, marching down the field here, believing they've been ordered to withdraw, maintaining their order. Morgan is back there rallying the militia, keeping them from leaving the field altogether. He looks over and the core of his army is retreating. Doesn't know what's going on. He comes charging up on his horse to Colonel Howard, John Howard of Baltimore, and he's like, what are you doing? Where are you going? And one phrase is, are you beaten? Are you beaten? Over and over again. He's just panicking. The colonel looks at Morgan, turns to his men, and to the effect of, have you ever seen men retreat in such good order? Like, look at these guys. They're not broken. We're just moving down the field. They're ordered to reload as they're marching. Morgan says he'll pick a new spot on the hillside. When they reach that spot, turn about and stand. This is that spot. To me, this is one of the most important locations in American Revolutionary War history. This is the high water mark of the British attempt to win the war. What happens here is the Continentals marching down the field, they reach the spot, they turn about, and it was described as being 10 to 15 yards away from the British. They just give it to them. You're looking at this volley of buck and ball that is so close that you're feeling the powder burns at that range. Half of the British front line drops right here. The remainder are trying to figure out what just happened. Where's their colonel? Oh, he's dead. The major, captain, lieutenant, same. They can't find their officer. They can't find their company. They're trying to rally. The Continentals see the confusion. Howard orders a charge. The Continental line just goes right into hand-to-hand combat. One participant says that they kept on them so much, there was never a chance for them to rally. The militia, who ran away earlier, have been reformed by Morgan, by Pickens. They come around the woods on both sides, get around and push in the British flanks. Washington's cavalry, remember he split his command earlier. They come around both sides, get in behind. The double envelopment. Only 4 times, well, 3.5 times, in world history is this done successfully. This is the first one since the Roman days when this is used. Tarleton is watching as his army is crushed. They're running down the field, trying to escape. He has 1 regiment left, his reserves about a half mile away, 200 cavalry. He orders them to charge up, form a line, rally the men. They refuse, turn and leave. Tarleton is left, holding the check with 54 cavalry against 1,800 approximate Americans coming down towards him. He can't win this. He tries to rally them. He begins to move off. Washington's cavalry sees some officers. Good target. They take off after him. Some accounts say this was Tarleton. We can't prove it. Saber clashes happen. Some officers almost get killed. We can't really verify the stories. But Tarleton escapes with those 54 cavalry. Now, the battle here is done in less than a half hour. It's also, I'm not sure if it's on the DVD that y'all had, but less than 30 minutes, about the same time as the movie, the entire battle is done. Now, the numerical victory here is that Morgan has inflicted 110 killed, 230 wounded, about 600 additional captured, 800 captured muskets, those 2 cannon, and 35 supply wagons. He's lost 12 killed outright,
Wow.
12 more that will die later of their wounds, but a little over 100 that will recover later on. All in that space of less than 30 minutes. Now, that's the numerical victory. The whole psychological victory here. This was Tarleton, bloody band. This was the British boogeyman that would charge out and destroy your patriot militia. He's been chased off the field. The flower of Cornwallis's army has suffered near 90% casualties here. These are the light troops. When Cornwallis hears about what happened here, he supposedly breaks his saber and vows to rescue these prisoners, takes off after them, kind of jump-starting the race to the Dan River, which leads to Guilford Courthouse, which leads to Virginia, which leads to Yorktown. The big change is here on this hillside. The Continentals turned, they fired. When they broke Tarleton's troops, they broke the whole momentum of the British here in the South. This is the beginning of the end of the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
That's why Cowpens is important.
In the visitor center?